Daniel stands on his private, wooded property early in the morning, looking toward the neighboring luxury golf course. A thick row of mature trees separates his land from the manicured fairways. Susan Miller arrives in a white HOA golf cart and points toward the row of trees blocking the golf course view. Daniel watches from his property while she gestures toward the trees as if giving instructions. Susan approaches Daniel at the property boundary and tells him the trees are ruining the community's golf course views. Daniel calmly explains that the trees are on his private property and refuses permission to remove them. Susan warns Daniel that the HOA will find another way to improve the golf course view. Daniel remains composed while standing beside a large oak tree on his property. The next morning, Daniel walks his property and discovers that several mature trees along the boundary have been illegally cut down. Fresh tree stumps and scattered branches reveal what happened. Daniel notices fresh tire tracks leading from his property toward the golf course. He carefully photographs the tracks, tree stumps, and disturbed soil with his smartphone. Daniel reviews his property security camera footage inside his home. The monitor shows workers cutting trees near the boundary, while an HOA golf cart is visible nearby. Daniel sits at his kitchen table with photographs, security footage screenshots, property documents, and a map spread out before him. He speaks with his attorney on the phone while organizing the evidence. A professional surveyor visits Daniel's property and verifies that the removed trees were entirely within his property boundary. Daniel watches as the surveyor places official markers along the line. Standing beside the damaged tree line, Daniel looks toward the golf course and realizes he can legally restore his privacy with a properly permitted structure on his own property. His expression changes from frustration to quiet determination. Daniel meets a licensed steel contractor at the cleared property boundary. He explains that he wants a large privacy wall built entirely on his side of the surveyed property line. The contractor presents detailed engineering drawings for a reinforced 20-foot steel privacy wall. Daniel carefully reviews the plans and confirms that the structure will remain completely within his property. Daniel receives the required local permits for the new wall. He keeps the documents organized in a folder while the contractor prepares the construction schedule. Several heavy-duty steel beams arrive at Daniel's property on flatbed trucks. Workers carefully unload the massive materials along the surveyed boundary. Susan drives past in her white HOA golf cart and suddenly notices the enormous steel materials. Her confident expression disappears as she realizes Daniel is building something much larger than a normal fence. Susan approaches Daniel and demands that he stop the construction. Daniel calmly shows her the approved permits and survey documents, making it clear that the project is being handled through the proper legal process. Construction crews begin preparing a reinforced foundation along the surveyed property line. Concrete footings are installed carefully while Daniel watches the workers. The first massive steel panels are lifted into place by a construction crane. The wall begins rising above the surrounding landscape, dramatically changing the view from the golf course. Day by day, additional steel panels are installed. The structure now towers above the golf course boundary, creating a dramatic privacy barrier between Daniel's property and the fairway. Golfers stop their carts and stare at the growing steel wall. The previously open view toward Daniel's property has completely disappeared behind the new structure. Susan rushes back to the clubhouse and calls an emergency HOA board meeting. Board members gather around a table covered with documents and photographs of the new wall. The HOA's attorney reviews Daniel's permits and property survey. After examining the paperwork, the attorney explains that the HOA may have little legal basis to demand removal of a properly permitted structure on private land. Susan looks back at photographs showing the trees the HOA had removed for the golf view. The board members realize that the wall was Daniel's response to the earlier tree removal. The final steel panels are carefully secured into place. The wall now stretches across the entire boundary, with every section aligned precisely with the surveyed property line. The completed wall stands approximately 20 feet high and stretches across the property boundary. Its weathered steel appearance gives Daniel's property a rugged, modern industrial character. Susan drives slowly along the golf course in her cart and looks toward the wall. There is no longer a clear view into Daniel's property or across the former tree line. Instead of leaving the cleared land empty, Daniel begins planting a new row of native trees on his property side of the wall. Young trees line the boundary as a long-term privacy landscape. After the dispute is resolved through the proper legal process, the HOA is required to compensate Daniel for the unauthorized tree removal and related property damage. Daniel reviews the settlement documents with his attorney. Daniel stands beside the newly planted trees and massive steel wall, looking across his peaceful private property. The golf course is now completely separated from his land. At sunset, Daniel walks along the finished wall, while the sky glows behind the golf course. The final shot pulls back to reveal the enormous wall protecting his private property and the new trees growing beside it. If you enjoyed this HOA story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more HOA stories. Round Pushpin, where you watching from? Tell us in the comments below.